Unless you have been living under a rock for the past 6 months, you are probably more than likely aware that there are going to be some significant changes coming to the real estate industry here very shortly. It is late July, and these changes are expected to go into effect in mid-August. So buckle up. It's about to get real. And that's what we're going to talk about in today's video, what it means for buyers and also what it means for sellers. Brian here with Lamacchia Realty. And without further ado, let me talk again exactly about what's going to happen in the middle of August. Due to a recent lawsuit that has been settled between the plaintiffs in the Sitzer-Burnett case out in Missouri and the National Association of Realtors and Associated Brokerages, moving forward, there is going to be a decoupling of the commissions paid in the transaction between both the buyer and the seller. So effectively what that means is moving forward, as of August 17th, there will be no more cooperating compensation in MLS. Now that is huge. Whether you agree, disagree, doesn't matter at this point. What's done is done, and those are essentially the constraints that we're going to need to deal with moving forward. So the best thing that you can do is educate yourself on what exactly that means and how do you best use this new system to help your clients, because above all, that's what matters the most, right? You want to make sure that your buyers are protected and that they are getting the best possible value. And then for sellers, you want to make sure that they're obviously maximizing the amount that they're getting for the home that they're selling. So let's talk about the logistics of actually how it's going to work. For buyers, and this is kind of the probably more important piece because this is the biggest change. For buyers, you are now going to be paying your buyer agent commission. Now, as I see it, there are 3 different ways that you can actually achieve that. The first and the simplest is you actually pay your buyer agent directly, right? So if a buyer agent charges you, let's say $15,000 for their services, they would, at the closing, they would be due that $15,000 directly from the buyer. The other option are really, they're one and the same, but they're very, very different in how they're actually accounted for on that closing statement, okay? So let's talk about the first one. The first one would be that you make it a term of your offer, a condition of your offer, that the seller pays your buyer agent compensation. So in doing that, when you go to close on the home, that's going to be listed as a line item on that closing statement as a separate fee charged directly to the seller. That is very, very different than the other option, and this is the third option, which is a seller concession. If the seller makes a concession, that money gets put on the closing statement as a concession to the buyer, and then the buyer then has the ability to do what they want with that seller concession. In this case, it would be to pay toward, that money would be going towards a buyer agent, but they could put that towards other closing costs as well. So you've got to be crystal clear whether it's a concession or if it's an expense being paid for directly by the seller. I think the vast majority, my gut feel is like the vast majority of these deals that come in with a buyer agent compensation attached to it, it will be requesting direct payment from the seller rather than a seller concession. The reason why you do not want a concession as a buyer is because that could have potential impacts on your financing, because depending on the type of loan product that you've selected, there are caps as to how much, 3%, 4%, 5%, 6%, 7%, how much of it can be seller concessions. So that is like super important. And I would encourage you to check with your lender to see what those limits are, depending on the loan product that you have. So I hope that makes it clear on the buy side. If it's not, just let me know down in the comments and I will try to explain it further. Now let's talk about sellers. So the whole premise behind this lawsuit, again, was to decouple these commissions, and sellers felt like they paid the buyer agent commission unnecessarily, or they weren't in a position to negotiate it. And now that it's been decoupled, they will have the opportunity to do that. Now, that being said, there are still a couple of options as I see it. Again, I'm not your brokerage. I'm not an attorney. I'm just a real estate agent here in the Boston market. But the way I see it is you're going to have, again, a couple different options. The first option and the simplest option is to, again, since there is no field in MLS, let's start with that. On August 17th, when you log into MLS, there is going to be no buyer agent compensation field. That's it. It's gone. That's part of the settlement terms that NAR has negotiated. So if you get that information through MLS, you are going to be sadly mistaken, because again, in August 17th, that comes out. And it's already come out of some MLSs. I know Indiana, I think in particular, has already enacted this. So they're already seeing the effects of this. But that does not preclude you as a seller from instructing your listing agent to make some type of, or provide some type of offer of compensation to buyer agents should a buyer agent ask. Okay. And then there's also the ability to leave it open-ended. Right? So you can say as a seller, I instruct you as the listing agent, when a buyer agent reaches out to you and asks if there's compensation, then you can say with them, you can share with them, absolutely, we are going to consider compensation, but we just need to make that part of your offer. So let's put in the offers and see what we get, and then we can make a decision which offer makes the most sense, which one's offering the best price and the best terms. And then lastly, the other option for sellers is to literally just say flat out that we are not offering any type of compensation. Now, that is a very risky strategy, because you're going to turn off a lot of potential buyers, because again, the buyer agent is going to report back to their buyer, because now the buyer is responsible for paying that buyer agent compensation, that in this particular, at this particular property, they are not going to be offering a compensation, and it's non-negotiable. So in that instance, the buyer may choose not to look at the property because they don't have the money up front to pay for that buyer agent compensation. So again, that's a high risk strategy, and that's not one that I would personally recommend, but some people may choose to do that. And that's the beauty of this new system, is you're going to have options available to you. That was the intent of this. So ultimately, I think it's a good thing, and it's going to change the way in which deals are structured. Where the confusion really sets in right now is in the forms that are going to be used specifically for the transaction. So there's a lot of back and forth. I know within my brokerage, we're making constant changes. We've got like draft 1, draft 2, draft 3, 4, 5. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. But the general premise is the same. And that is like, hey, if you're a seller, we're going to put clear as day exactly how much we are charging you as the listing agent. So that's part of the transaction is going to be negotiated again with the seller. And then there'll be some other things that we can negotiate or discuss in advance of actually listing the property. Like, are you willing to offer some type of buyer agent compensation? Are you willing to offer some type of seller concession that the buyer can then use for whatever? Or are you not willing to offer anything? And that's fine too. It's totally up to the seller, right? All we can do is make sure that we're guiding our sellers and our clients in general through this, help them navigate through this new way of doing business. But ultimately, I think it's going to be I wouldn't say a non-issue, but things are going to settle where they settle within the first couple of months. So it's probably going to be a little ugly for the first month or two in terms of like, how do we actually account for all this stuff in the deal? But, that'll all get sorted out very quickly. But one thing is becoming abundantly clear, and that is that now more than ever, people are seeking professional guidance because there are so many changes in this industry happening like right now. So if you're going into it as a buyer and you're like, oh, great, now, I can go direct to the listing agent. Terrific. You go to the listing agent, and more often times than not, that listing agent, they represent the seller. So do you want to go into that transaction unrepresented, I do not think that's a great strategy. And I think a lot of people would agree that you need someone on your side looking out for your best interests. So now as a buyer, I think it is more important than ever to interview different agents, different buyer agents, and treat it no differently than if you were selling a home and you were interviewing different listing agents. I mean, I've listed homes, and I can tell you that I'm not the only realtor that's going in there and doing a listing presentation. They're meeting with 2, 3, 4, sometimes a half dozen or more people just to get an idea of what the services that they provide and what their value proposition is and how much they're going to charge, right? So buyers, you need to be doing the same thing. You need to meet with at least a couple, if not 3, 4, 5 different buyer agents to see what value they can provide in the transaction and how much that's going to cost. Because ultimately, it is something that you can 100% negotiate. In the past, you could negotiate it, but a lot of people didn't realize that. Now, it's obvious. You can negotiate that number. So moving forward, there's some big changes happening in the real estate industry. I'm excited about it personally because anytime there's, some type of disruption, that to me reeks of opportunity. So I think it's a good thing ultimately for agents because it may weed out some people who just aren't interested at this point in their career of learning something new because we've been doing this the same way for about 30 years now. So for those folks, they may just bow out and say, forget it. I'm all set. I'm not interested in actually negotiating and showing value in a transaction for the services that I provide as a buyer agent. But for the people who do, really provide tremendous value to their clients, it is a wonderful opportunity. And it's great that people will have buyers specifically will have a much better idea of, okay, is this someone that we want to work with or not? And how much value are they bringing to the transaction? So those are my thoughts. Let me know down in the comments how you're feeling about all of this, agents and consumers, right? If you are in the process of considering selling your home or considering purchasing a home, let me know if you've seen some changes already in your market because this fascinates me and I love getting feedback on videos like this on my channel. So anyways, that's all I have for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. We keep things very current on this channel. I do a video once every other week or so as my schedule permits. And it's a great community. So again, thank you. And we'll catch you in the next one. Take care.